Our guest today is Bethany. I found Bethany in my travels on LinkedIn. Has a very diverse background, and we'll get into that a little bit. We'll do a little bio, but I'm super excited to chat with her today because one of the things that we've been talking with various different folks in the program is kind of like what me and Dan just talked about, jumping out and getting to the 301 course before we get through the 101 and 201 stuff. Not that it's, irreconcilable. It's not that we can't fix things, but what I really want to make sure that we're doing in addition to kind of, scaling your organizations is making sure you have the proper daily practices locked in and you see some transformational growth within yourselves as well. So that's a topic that I'm going to touch on first. I'm going to just pop open the newest iteration of my website, which you guys can check out at quattromebrands.com, but I'll pull it up on the screen real quick. I decided to switch to this format where it's more of like a field guide. I'd been hearing from Matt Vols specifically, but some other folks that we really wanted to get into the hardcore essentials and nuts and bolts education and that type of thing. And so I really threw the kitchen sink in there in this document that I put up on my website to really allow you guys, as well as future students of the program, an early look or a continuous look at my latest philosophies, as well as understanding where AI has been and how it's evolved to right now. So the way it's set up is like a quick short story or a read. It's probably about 7 or 8 pages, but it kind of gets through the history of AI, varying different philosophies, people that have trained me, my thoughts. A lot of the stuff that we talk about with the loop ladder is in here, as well as the proper way to prompt something. All of that stuff is in here, and I'm giving it away to the public, mainly because I feel like, similar to my time with Gary, it's not about just having knowledge. It's about going through the repetitions and doing it and talking to people and being advised. So it's out there for everybody to see right now, but I really want to hone in on these practices over the next 5 to 6 weeks while we're together, as well as bringing it back to basics in general for future cohorts. So that's out there for any of you guys to look at when you want. I'm not going to read through the whole thing here on this call, but it's just in the spirit of trying to, optimize the program moving forward. I wanted to make sure everybody has all of my thinking in one place. And then also, if you ever share it with anybody, I've created a handy dandy little guide down at the bottom where they can either I've consolidated everything into a markdown file. So if they want to copy the markdown file, put it in their own LLM and discuss whether or not joining a program like this is right for them, they can do that. If they'd rather reach out to me and talk to me about whether or not the program is right to join, they can always send me a note, and my email is copyable. I see Andrew's hand. What's going on, bro?
Yeah, I just wanted to share something I did really quick that and give you kudos for. And I had a conversation with Dan earlier this week about, I think if you're introducing somebody to the cohort, the most important thing that you can do is help them realize that Joe's not, peacocking on the stage and showing all the crap he's doing. It's actually applicable. And this morning was a great example during my stand up. I had my team member working on something, and I basically just began to do what you've shown me, Joe, and then I'm handing off the project that she's going to be able to run with it and truly be able to delegate it. And so she's learning how to build agents and all these things as well. And it gave me an opportunity to say, hey, I actually don't need you to build the agent. AI can build the agents for you as long as you direct it in some of those types of things. So
Awesome.
I really think that's a really important thing, Joe, that is greatly underappreciated and underrated. And I just want to publicly thank you for that, as well as, nudge some of the other folks here. Like, we're only as good as what we can transfer and scale. So make sure you give your team an opportunity to be able to do some of those things.
Absolutely. And that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. That's why when a lot of you guys have gotten stuck on certain things, instead of coming in and trying to do everything for you, I've tried to make it easier to understand. So I think 4 of you guys are victims of me creating these like middleware installation wizard type things where it's, the interesting thing is the frontier labs have not necessarily figured out how to guide a consumer journey all that well. So in the meantime, I think that's an opportunity for folks like us that are building businesses and really getting our hands dirty with AI, to figure out how to create those types of things. So for me, it's always bring it back to the center. Yes, I'll show you how to do it, but more importantly, I want to give you the steps to show you how to do it. I don't want to do it for you. So for those of you that have them, I welcome feedback. I'm also probably going to share some of those builds inside of the Circle community so you guys can all see these different, installation wizards we've created and the Domino's pizza tracker and all the bells and whistles, because those things are pretty easy to ship once you get some reps in your system. But without further ado, I think we've talked enough about that. I'm going to pop open the topic of today. I'm going to walk you through a few slides that really set up the conversation with Bethany. And then I'll give her a little bit of time to talk about her background and we'll dive into a nice conversation. So, the topic of today's conversation is water in the pipes. So before we build more agents, which I think that's going to also we're going to start getting into more scale when we start getting into August here. So I do have some speakers lined up that are going to talk about things like paid media and agentic systems and stuff like that, and how to really dial them in the right way. But for now, I want to talk about something that is going to be fundamental to those scale conversations, and that's having a thought on not just how to build scale within your organization, but asking yourself the right questions about how do you work with machines, and first and foremost, how do you work with humans, right? Because the thing that we're trying to replicate or copy when we build these agents is high functioning and high performing workers. So we have to understand how if we're a person that's never worked with, let's be honest, if I'm somebody that's never managed a chief creative officer, then I need to kind of investigate that a little bit. What's the dichotomy? What do I know about it? How would I interact with this type of a person in the real world? What are their idiosyncratic tendencies? How do they think? How do they feel? All that kind of stuff. Because when you build out the prompts that really govern, how they behave, when you create the markdown files, when you create the job descriptions and stuff like that, if you've never managed a chief creative officer before, you're usually going to probably pull a paragraph from the internet somewhere, or maybe you ask another agent to tell you what working with Lee Clow is like or something like that, but it doesn't really paint the truest picture of what working with one of these people is like. So we want to spend a little more time dwelling on that and being more thoughtful as we're creating these things. So water in the pipes. So everybody started building pipes really fast, which is great. My hope is, and what I told Dan earlier in the week was that not a waste of time. It's great that you have those things. We can always fix them. We can always work on them. We can always troubleshoot, fix the leaks, make sure they're routed to the right rooms, all that kind of stuff. But let's make sure that we understand the context and why it's being built in the first place, the whole org, what is it designed to do? How are we scaling transcendent sales and stuff like that? So what's flowing through the pipes? There's two main things to consider. The pipes are just the machinery, right? So agents, prompts, automations, tools, workflows, all of this stuff is visible. Building it's exciting. I think when you see a lot of people talking about these things on the internet and places like LinkedIn or X and stuff like that, a lot of what gets talked about is that machinery because it's the most transferable. People understand building widgets. They understand the idea of shipping a product, shipping a thing that's useful within your organization. But the thing that's usually the hardest to really understand and transfer and distribute in social media content and stuff like that is the water or the judgment, right? The decisions, the information, the taste, the feedback, the thinking that moves through the system. So, much if you're a sci-fi fan, you understand what dark matter. So much like dark matter, this is invisible and it's the thing that actually makes everything worth automating. And to the thing that I'm really passionate about, it's not just about agents and machines. It's about how do we make better humans. So the water is a loop. Everything we build here runs on the same cycle, not a pipeline that ends. A loop comes back and continues to refine itself. The returning line here is the water. So input, process, output, reflection, refinement, and then back to input. If it doesn't close, it's just a pipe. So technology scales what already exists. If the water's clean, AI is going to make you faster at being good. If the loop is broken, unexamined judgment, no reflection, the AI makes you faster at being wrong. And that's what we've seen time and time again. And I'm as guilty of it as well. So when I shoot the gun and I build a bunch of stuff without a lot of thought and discernment up front, I see them break down fast all the time. Now, fortunately, because I've built a habit around trying things with AI, I'm able to diagnose failures fast and move on or correct if it's worth correcting. But as you guys are getting more reps in the system, just keep that in mind as you're going along. Like You want to be able to be honest with your diagnosis on some of the things that you're building and being able to go back and fix if it's worth fixing or move on to the next thing if it's not. So, three lines that we're walking today. So, amplify or erode. So, AI can carry a low value effort or it can quietly atrophy the muscle that you need the most. Which capabilities do you want to protect and on purpose? Leverage or surrender? Do I let an agent handle it? Is the leverage right up until it becomes an abdication? Like, are we actually delegating the wrong things? And then adopt or transform. So same tools, two outcomes. One org just gets faster, one becomes something new. What separates the two? And so those are some of the topics that we'll get into in this discussion. Bethany, how are you doing today? Do you want to give the team a little bit of a background? I mean, you've been talking over the past couple of months. I was fascinated at the duality of your career and your life to date. Let's get started with your passion for hair and what you did in your prior life, just to kind of get everybody, pique everybody's interest real quick.
Yeah, for sure. So this is technically my second career. I had a full former career as a celebrity professional hairstylist and makeup artist. I did that for about 16 years. So I started off in salons, fresh out of high school. I worked closely building up the marketing there. So I had Facebook with the edu email address. I'm sure I don't know how old everybody is, but I grew up with social media and the evolution of like pages and marketing and all of those things. So for the salons, hairstylists focus on hair and we focus on our clients. We don't really focus on marketing ourselves. That's the salon owner's job. So I always had a passion for that. Ended up on a TV show on the Oxygen Network in 2011. That was very interesting. So I've done the reality TV stint. I was in like LA with no cell phone and contact to the outside world for about 2 months. It
Wow.
was an interesting experience for sure. And then even crazier, you come home and 6 months later, you're on national television with, hundreds of thousands of people watching you. So I ended up being top five out of thousands of people who applied for the TV show. So that was kind of an interesting accomplishment. And then I went on to work with celebrities at New York Fashion Week, different organizations, and landed in a beauty tech startup company, which was interesting. So I was able to leverage my experience with building brands and kind of social media marketing and got into this tech organization and decided I wanted to go back to school around 30. So when I was 30, I went back, I triple majored in marketing, advertising, public relations, and graduated during 2020. I started
Yeah.
my company before I went back to school because, college students are broke. It's even worse when you're 30 and you're living by yourself and trying to make a way through. So I was doing just kind of like social media management, anything I could do to get it started, designing, anything to build brands. And what I've discovered as my career has moved forward into the agency space, into sales and organizational design, is that I had a heavy focus on systems. I had a unique ability to look at something, a problem, or somebody's goal or a challenge, and be able to see how to get from point A to point B efficiently or quickly pivot and learn as you're working your way through and find solutions to the problem quicker than other people were able to. So I've taken a lot of that into my career as I've been building over the years. I worked for some really prominent digital marketing agencies, did a lot of sales. I brought in lots of dollars, which was great. And AI, the conversation as of late has just been something that's really captured my attention. And I've had a lot of different questions and posted a lot of interesting things that capture attention just about the application of systems and human behavior when it comes to working with AI and new technology and just the things that we should take into account as we move forward.
Tell everybody what your company is now and what you do for a living today in 2026, and then we'll dive into some of the questions.
Absolutely. So my company is called The Draw Agency. It started off as a brand and a business development consultancy, and it's evolved further into kind of like anything with growth systems, AI implementation, strategic business development, problem solving, like, companies that have been around for a long time that need digital, revamping pretty much because they don't know how to move into this technology and this infrastructure. I worked with small to mid-sized businesses, and my goal is to work with them for a duration of time, help them build out the systems to be able to continue growing, and then I like to exit and get out, hand over the tools, and let you run with it. So that's
Cool.
that's what I do.
So in your travels and in your, current agency or in your past like 6 or 7 years or so, have you seen organizations that have built systems that they don't understand? And what happens, and this could be an AI question or a non-AI question, but what happens when a company builds a system that they don't understand or automates a process that they don't fully understand? Like, is there serious ramifications, time lost, money lost, those types of things? So talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've seen it applied in many different ways. I've seen it applied in creative departments, marketing departments, sales departments. I've seen it applied in, private practices as well. When you put effort and scale or try to scale behind a system that isn't clearly defined, or the staff doesn't know what you expect, or your outcomes aren't, fine tuned so that you're getting exactly what you want out of that specific process, you're just going to get more crap, for lack of a better word. Guys, I apologize, but it's like,
Mm,
if you build it and you define it and you really take that time to hone it, just like an employee, you hire a new employee and you train them and you tell them what you expect from them, but then you also give them the tools and empower, and that feedback loop, because humans operate on a feedback loop too. Then you're able to scale something that is going to give you exactly what you're looking for. So like in my time with AI, like I've trained a couple of agents. I'm currently really fine tuning a co-founder, like someone who thinks like me, like an agent that thinks like me and can really give me that back and forth as I'm building something. You just have to really take the time to hone in on, like, I go as far to put my beliefs in it. Like I am a Christian, very, very strong believer. So I put a little bit of that in there, my morals, like the things I focus on, and then what I expect out of the outcomes, and fine tune them to make sure I'm getting good stuff out. Because if you don't put the best in, you're going to get the worst out
yeah.
at scale.
Now, flip into like your current ecosystem if you're looking at a computer screen, because I don't want to demonize agents either, because I
Oh no,
deployed
I love them.
several dozen of them myself.
Yeah.
But looking at your screen on a daily basis, we know that you have like your go-tos, right? You've got, just like any organization, right? You have 100 employees, you probably have your 3 to 5 that you talk to the most because they impact your business the most. How do you create systems, or do you create systems where you can find, maybe underperforming agents, or maybe agents that weren't set up the right way? Like, do you do anything to kind of go in and double back and audit the way they were programmed, or maybe analyze your own practices and understand why you're not using them as much? Because I have my own thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear what you have to think about maybe restoring some confidence in an agent you built that you don't use that much.
Yeah, for sure. So I really try to structure my agents like I would structure an organization. So like I think that there are specific roles for each, and sometimes when you overload an individual or an agent with responsibility, it gets a little muddy, and you're not going to get 100% out of that individual or that agent when they are operating within a process. So I take it all the way back to like SOPs. I do have everything logged in my system. I do have a lot of markdown files. I've heavily organized the memory and what's in the back, and really try to optimize, like cutting down the time pretty much. Because, they say that when you build all these autonomous organizations, the bill can get very high very fast. And as we can see, the big companies are burning through money at an exceptional rate. So I don't have that kind of money. So I try to make sure that I can make it as efficient as possible, and that I have prompted my agents to kind of, like, if there's something that I edit in the process through a conversation or through an evaluation, that they'll go back and they'll update the markdown files with that. So when they go to do the process again, that it's already kind of corrected. I have had some that just didn't quite work out, and I had to go back and reorganize that system. Creatives is a big one. I used to do design and branding, so I'm very, very picky about execution. And it's not, you don't just need a one creative content agent or one designer. You also have to have someone that's in charge of the brand, that double checks the work that comes out of the one and make sure that it aligns. And copy doesn't need to be done by the same agent that does the visuals. Sometimes the copy has to come from a strategist who's already tapped into the market research, who already has the insights that are going to get the right copy out, or the right content out. And then that goes through a process, and then there always has to be a harness that checks before it goes forward to anything else. And then I always kind of have the final I prefer to be at the top doing the approvals, the final approvals of what comes from my agents, versus the harness itself. You can build an agent or a structure that's routine to evaluate what comes out of the agents with a specific checklist that you identify.
Gotcha. And have you found that in the past couple of years, as you've scaled up your knowledge on AI and working with agents, that you've gotten in any situations where you've offloaded too much, where maybe some of your judgments getting distributed through the system, and you've had to reclaim some of those responsibilities just to keep your mind sharper? I know I've seen myself doing some of those things over time, where I find myself outsourcing too much, and then the way I think about things in the real world, where I'm giving feedback to somebody, seems to be kind of a little bit more dull, because I haven't exercised that muscle in a while. Have you run into that issue at all?
So I personally have been incredibly cautious about it. So I love technology, I love AI, but I also have like what's the word I'm looking for? Like trepidation, is that a word? Like you're kind of a
It
little
is a word. Yeah.
cautious. I didn't want to put too much in there of myself. I like to keep my secret sauce, and I like to optimize my tools. So that's actually a topic, as I mentioned to you, Joe, the other day, I really kind of geeked out about was like the human cognitive offload and the atrophy, as we were referring to it. Like, you want to optimize your output, you want to optimize your work and really maximize like your calendar and the time it takes to get things done. But then you also want to make sure that you preserve your human agency. You want to preserve what you add to the organization or to whatever it is that you're specifically building. So I a lot of people are talking about like handing it over, giving everything you can to the AI. I've always been a little bit reserved on that. And I like to make sure that I'm learning from the AI. So in my engagements and in the process that I'm building, sometimes I'll ask, as I'm going through something with my co-founder I'm building, is like, how confident are you in this? What am I missing? Like, I do a white gap analysis every time I'm playing around with my agents because they have access to everything. They have
Hmm.
access to things I've never experienced before, or that some other, billionaire might be over playing around with his and he put it into the system and my AI could tap into that. Like, you never know things that I haven't tapped. So if I'm asking and constantly checking what I'm building, I'm still learning and still being able to internalize that and take that into my own memory, into my own writing, into my own thought process and strategy building.
Nice. So similar to like, and I'm gonna pop out of our spotlight for a minute and we're gonna interact with the group a little bit and then we'll ask the rest of the questions. But one quick
Sure.
question, real quick. Have you ever seen anything that was a loop that was created by an organization in honor of a strategy they were trying to execute that led to a different outcome, more unexpected outcome, or a better outcome than what they were aiming for? A good example, just to kind of ground it a little bit, when I first started really using AI, I mean, not when I first started using AI, but when I started pointing it at my health, the goal was completely different. It was to try to make myself a better CEO for a product business that I was trying to stand up. And the net benefit of what I was doing with my Nozempic prompt was I completely transformed the way I attack my day and prioritize through clarity. And I had this eureka moment that I wanted to share with everybody, that we as humans can pre-plan and execute AI or execute systems with the usage of AI to accelerate progress. And that's why we're sitting here today. It's a happy accident. Have you seen instances in your world, either in your company or with clients you've worked with, where maybe the end destination was slightly different and then a happy accident took them on a completely different trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have one recently, like the last couple of months. I'm building a lead generation business dev funnel for a clinical trial institute. So it's kind of like very high touch sales because you're selling, a long clinical trial, which can take anywhere from, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. If they're doing long term, they're going, years at that. And they had a list of like targeted brands that they wanted to go after, or companies they wanted to go after. And usually in sales, people just jump in like, oh, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm going to sell myself. So we start building these agents to do that. And then it started to evolve the strategy and the feedback we were getting from the market research to actually make it an incredibly personalized sales process, which was incredibly effective. So like, I knew the whole tidbits of the sequences and kind of adding value and the decks and all of those things that we had to loop into the process. But then we ended up getting such a high quality sales structure, like a strategy from playing with the AI that has proven incredibly effective. So we went in with one goal and we ended up coming out with something that was really incredible that they can take and they could scale and hopefully increase their business moving
Yeah.
forward.
That's awesome. And team on the phone, I think you're going to find that relatively commonplace. I know I've seen it at least 7 or 8 different inflection points over the last 7 months where you aim at one direction, but then something amazing happens because the technology is moving so fast that you pivot fast and take advantage.